2018 is the last year that it was studied, and it shows that $16.8 billion was stolen from about 17 million US consumers alone in 2017. As you can see, over the past 6 years, we're talking $106 billion were stolen. And this is stolen from consumers either directly or through businesses who end up compromised one way or another. So this shows you the level of the issues that are happening.
And this all relates to big data. As you know, we're sort of in an age of information being available online and other places. And the reason for this surge is basically because there's more information out there, both personal and private and confidential, that's sort of flowing between all of us, including financial information. And it's getting a lot easier for bad actors and thieves and predators to sort of attack. So we're seeing quite the surge, not only in 2008, but now in 2019. And the predictions are that it's gonna continue to go up, and that cybersecurity is going to be, the hottest, if not one of the hot areas, if not the hottest area, as far as crimes and concerns going forward.
The place where businesses are by and large targeted is through their employees, and it's in phishing. It comes through emails. It can come via emails that look like they're legitimate business proposals. It can come through emails that look like they're coming from you as the boss or the owner. Basically, they're trying to entice folks to respond, to engage in a conversation, or to click on something, or to open an attachment. By and large, these kinds of phishing emails are the main way they get in. These folks are now targeting businesses by doing a lot of research on the business first. It's no longer a broad spectrum hit anymore. They know who the corporate heads are, they know who the big guys are, they know where the middle level managers are, and so they know exactly who to pretend to be. They know who these folks are, who their direct reports are, and they actually are targeting employees in a very specific way. And so depending on your setup, it's really, really important to make sure that your email is is secure, that you have email process and procedure set up, that your employees and your staff are not using work email for personal issues and for personal reasons, that you have a set of processes in place to make sure that things are not just clicked on or responded to or opened indiscriminately. By itself, email is a very quick and easy form of communication. It's by far the least secure method of communication that you're going to have go out there. If you're dealing in confidential communications, if you're going to have to send anything that's private information, email is probably the worst way to do it unless you're dealing with an encrypted email system. So if you're using Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail for your business, that's not encrypted. And so those kinds of systems are very, very hack-proof. In fact, years ago, Google made a point in a court filing to say they feel that they are your legal secretary and they have a right to read all your emails. So keep that in mind. What Robin will be talking about is all the laws that apply to your businesses going forward when it comes to protecting the personal information of not only your employees, but your customers.
Yes, that dovetails nicely into the next slide. Different states, there's no federal privacy regulation as of right now, as of today, but different states have expectations and requirements as far as how you sort of manage the information that you keep in your systems. And a lot of people don't know that. I'm going to assume that most of us have businesses in the Maryland, DC, VA, sort of area. So let's start perhaps with the Maryland Personal Information Protection Act, more affectionately called PIPA. for short. It went into effect January of last year. What you're going to see is that as cybersecurity issues grow, more and more regulation comes up. Some of the problems with laws is that they're generally a little late, and they sometimes come about after you sort of need them, because this is a fast-growing area. The law will probably lag a little bit behind the actual needs of businesses and customers. But this is an example of one state law that has been implemented, and it requires a deadline for you to notify your customers if there is a data breach, which is something that you should really think about. I've worked in-house as a lawyer at some large companies like American Express and Capital One, and there were data breaches every day. There were always people kind of trolling, trying to get in, trying to get financial information from customers. So it was sort of went without saying that it was happening, and we were constantly reporting to customers and regulators about it. But it becomes an even greater burden for small businesses in the sense that putting together the language for the notification can be, quite taxing, and obviously responding to inquiries after such a breach is pretty troubling. But the law requires it, especially in Maryland. The sorts of information that they're very concerned about are such like passport numbers and other identification numbers issued by the federal government, state ID card numbers, health information, that medical history like conditions, information, diagnosis, any health insurance policy, certificate numbers or health insurance subscriber numbers, biometric data such as fingerprints, voice prints, usernames or email addresses in combination with a password or security are also things they worry about. So those are examples of things that if you're those are on your system and you find that somehow perhaps you lost something, left it somewhere, someone stole something from you, you tell that there's been some sort of breach of your system. It really does require notification from that point. And it's not just notification when you get around to it, like next year or the year after. There's a time frame for notifying. You have 45 days to get that notification out after you determine that there's been a breach. And there are penalties, of course, for not acting on that information. They range anywhere from fines of $1,000 for first offenses up to $5,000 for subsequent offenses, and on and on and on. And people can obviously bring litigation against you if they feel like you've somehow been a part of their information getting released, and there are lots of civil damages for those sorts of things. So it's definitely something to take seriously. And with the enactment of this law last year, it's something that governments and the state is taking pretty seriously too. So let's keep going with the scary law. I don't know how much you all are dealing with international customers or people that are perhaps do not reside in the United States. But there's been a lot of buzz recently discussing what's known as the European Union General Data Protection Regulation. And while that may seem like that's something that the people in the UK have to deal with or others, it actually does impact small businesses here in the US. If you are interacting with overseas customers and marketing your goods or selling your goods, those laws do apply to you too. They're basically two triggers. If you market goods or services to residents of the EU, or you monitor the data of EU citizens. So regardless of their physical location at that time, you're subject to the GDPR. So just keep in mind that the GDPR is a bit of some might consider a stricter regulation than some of the US laws, because other places outside the US protect data and look at data in a different way. And I would say that the EU is a place that really would like to maintain records of how the business is processing EU customer data and cooperating with GDPR authorities. So just mention that briefly because the fines, again, can be really high if you're found out to be sort of, interacting with EU customers, having breaches, not notifying them, and their requirements are higher. Again, you have 72 hours to notify any EU person of a data breach, which, as you can imagine, is pretty fast. So you don't get that 15-day, 20-day, and the fines can be 20 million euros, which is a lot of money. So you don't want to run afoul with this. Sort of similarly, there's also a new statute in California that's taking effect on January 1st, 2020, that a lot of people are talking about. It's called the California Consumer Privacy Act of 2018. I'll just touch on it briefly. Its application is limited to mid-sized or larger businesses, and it's for profit from the selling of consumer protection, personal information. So if you earn 25 million in revenue, this impacts you, and you have 50,000 or more consumers, and you derive 50% or more of your annual revenue from selling personal information. You should really get up to speed on what's going on in California, because if you're, again, operating or impacting California residents, you can be fined up to $7,500 for each penalty. So it could grow and be pretty taxing.
So we put together, we were trying to keep it a top 10, but it was really 11. Develop cybersecurity principles for yourselves. This should include for mobile devices, laptops, tablets, thumb drives, what have you. What are those principles? How are they to be used? Who's to use them? How they're going to be used? Where they can be used? And make sure you train your employees and refresh that training. I can't tell you that second step is important. Otherwise, step one is just words on paper. Training and refreshing the training is really important for yourself and for your workforce. The data breaches that Robin talked about when I was practicing and I was filing these lawsuits she mentioned, I would get into depositions and I would ask the folks, and they would proudly bring forward the manual on how they were, here's my cybersecurity policy and here's my training policy. And we would ask, when was the last time you trained your workforce? How do you monitor your workforce? How did you enforce the workforce when they violated the rules? And so it turns out that it never happened. So it's not just words on paper. Find your cybersecurity policy, train, refresh, monitor, and enforce. Otherwise, it's not doing you and your business reputation any good. We talked about providing firewall security for your internet connection. That was that VPN I mentioned. You want to make sure that if you're at the office, that if you're using Wi-Fi, that it has the high security on it. You want to make sure that it's got a password, it's not open for anyone to pop onto. Business data and information that's important, you want to make sure you have backups on them. A lot of folks are big on the cloud. Be aware that places like, what was that company that everybody uses? Dropbox, they got hacked. So if you're going to use a third-party cloud to store that is so mainstream, make sure their security is good. There's a lot of other places out there that are like the NASA of cloud backup services. You want to find those guys. Digital spring cleaning, this is really key. One of the things that we as small business owners do is we hold on to information way longer than we need it. And so that's where we are very, very vulnerable, because we end up losing things we never should have had in the first place. So we end up asking for information we don't need, and then we end up storing it for much longer than we actually need it. And then when it's lost, now we're in that 15-day period of trying to piece together whose information did I have, what was in that box, oh my God, what was on that thumb drive? Oh, that was from 2016, I don't even remember. And so digital spring cleaning, if you set up a document retention and destruction policy as part of your cybersecurity principles and stick to it, Then your digital spring cleaning, as you're cleaning your house, clean your businesses up as well. You want to control physical access to all of your computers. You want to make sure that not anyone can get onto it. So if you do work from home, which I did for a while, you want to make sure it's password protected so your kids can't get on it and play video games. My kids never understood why they couldn't play video games on my computer. I said, nope, it's not mine. It belongs to my clients. You can't get on it. We talked about Wi-Fi networks need to have secure and complicated passwords. Every password you use should be a passphrase. So, and it should be something that means nothing to you. It should have nothing to do with you. If you love cats, it should have nothing to do with cats. No one should be able to know anything and be able to guess it. It should have, and it should and you have to if you want to say, I love stop signs, make the O a 0 and the S could be a $sign. Make it something completely random and make it a phrase of letters and numbers. The last thing you want to do is what the British military did, which is put it up on a wall and then take a picture of Prince Harry with the Wi-Fi password over his shoulder so that the world could then pipe into the British military's wireless access. Don't do that. So there's a lot of third-party password storage. Again, make sure they're not password captures because it could be a scam that they just want your password. If they are not secure and then someone hacks into them, they now have all your passwords. If you can come up with a passphrase that really means nothing to you, you can add an extension for every other. So you can, whatever, I love stop signs, Bank of America. I love stop signs, eBay. It's just, you can come up with tricks that works, but Consumer Reports is a really good research tool if you want to look into password keepers and see which ones are safe. We just learned about this. I didn't know about it. The Federal Communications Commission has a cyber planner for small businesses. So you can get on there and just enter in information about your business, and it'll actually help you design your cyber plan. I've started to play with it a little bit, sort of entering in my old business and just sort of play with it a little bit. It's interesting. So I would take some time and give yourself a rainy Saturday like tomorrow, which will be a nice rainy Saturday, and just play around with it. It's I think it's on our resource page, which is at the end of this presentation deck, but you'll see it on the handouts. It has the address, but it's a useful tool. Scams that are targeting the business community. I thought this would be useful because this is an entree into your systems. The ones we hear the most about, I talked a little bit about the fake manager CEO imposters. What happens is you get an email from what looks to be like your personal email account when you're out of town, and yes, they somehow know when you're out of town. My credit cards don't work. Please go buy some gift cards, give me the numbers, put in a requisition order for a refund, I got you covered. The other big one, fake invoices. It was hitting businesses in the county hard. We were getting a lot of complaints from the businesses. They were hitting the county agencies, oddly enough, like they should have known better. It's all one scam or another, and what they do, and this goes back to training, is they want to know who your accounts receivable and accounts payable clerks are, which in a small business is probably the same person, but they just want to know whose name to put on the invoice. And if it's a busy company, they may not know if a shipment has come in, did someone really order it, and things like that. So the fake invoices come in hard. There was a company that was selling Lucite boxes and routes all over the county so that people could put these boxes in candy, so to help with finding lost pets and lost children. It was all a scam. A real charity is going to be listed with the Department of State, the Maryland State Department. Business coaching or fake SEO experts, those are huge. So when you're looking out there, if you're looking for like website help, make sure you check the folks out. A flashy website is not enough. You really want to be able to look on Yelp and other review sites. Make sure these guys are really legitimate. Business listings, you get a lot of folks who claim that they can improve your business listing, they can improve your Google reviews. What they really are doing is just taking your money and putting fake stuff out there. We get complaints from businesses about those kinds of things. I had a call from a carpet store where their competitor hired one of these guys, and all they're doing is putting in bad reviews about their competitor and nothing good about them. So it's a bad scam. Well, we talked about invoice scams a little bit. So you should really train your staff to make sure that they're checking everything, make sure that they're not paying for items that weren't ordered, make sure that they cross-check invoices against orders, against shipments. And you have to make sure that that you're not just paying out money because you're too busy. This is, while not really about invoice scams, cyber insurance policies, and I don't know if you want to talk about it, but E&O policies, if you have an errors and omissions policy, don't have a cyber rider.
Yeah, and you may have heard of cyber insurance policy, cyber risk policy, cyber liability insurance. Any of those things are kind of what we're talking about here. I would encourage you to consider and look into some policies. Most commercial insurance providers now offer it. You really should look closely at the terms and what exactly they cover, because like with all insurance, some of it is not quite as good as others. So you really want to make sure they cover what you anticipate needing it for. I would also say that, insurance policy is kind of one layer of protection, but the best protection is effective prevention measures, obviously. You don't want to have to rely on your cyber insurance policy when things go wrong, because there are quite a bit of news and lawsuits that have found that cyber insurance policies generally only cover if you report to law enforcement agencies in a timely manner, and a lot of other caveats. So it's not, you can be reckless and they'll come in and pay you money. It's very, very narrow and very, very specific, and they have to feel like you acted reasonably, you did the appropriate investigation, you notified the appropriate authorities, and then they may cover you for a very narrow facet. That being said, cyber breaches can be, business ending. They can cost a lot of money, and having some layer of protection in this day and age may be worth it. But remember, if they find that you acted carelessly, you might fall out of the terms of that cyber insurance policy. So again, paying attention to some of the points that Tracy and I have made is really still important, because cyber insurance isn't a one-stop, free-for-all. So cyber scammers, obviously, they're always trying to pretend there's somebody that you can trust, somebody that you know. They're trying to create a sense of urgency, like with the scammers who pretend to be your boss trying to get your money. They try to use some form of intimidation or fear. The reason that they go after the mid-level or the higher level managers in these imposter scams is because they know that on some level the lower level employees are a little too afraid to question their bosses. So they are using a bit of fear to try and do that. Gift cards, if you're ever asked, gift cards are for gifts. And if you just remember that, anytime anyone is asking you to use a gift card for any other purpose that's not for a gift, that's usually the first clue that something's wrong. And if you can get that through to your employees, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, what a wonderful world this would be. But so that's like the most valuable lesson I think you can teach folks as a means of avoiding scams generally, whether it's cyber or otherwise.